Hello there, and welcome to our next class for the fourth unit. This is a class that is part of Beehive School and 8th High School. Our subject is science, and we are working on week number 32. Let's go over our presentation, and let's start with our end in mind. Students will be able to develop a claim related to the coevolution of Earth systems by supporting it with facts from the lesson. All right, and here you have a summary of the activities that you need to complete today. Number 1, read and summarize topic 6.03b. Please focus a little bit more on pages 5 and 6. And of course, after you finish with your summary, upload it to Educativa. Then number 2, download and complete the worksheet to Coevolution of Earth Systems worksheet from page number 6. And lastly, make a compilation of your work and upload it to Agilex, please. So, of course, in Agilex, you are going to upload the worksheet from Agilex and the summary that you're going to do. Remember that that has to go to Educativa. And we're going to start by talking about the coevolution of Earth systems. And this is something extremely interesting. And of course, after we study this a little bit more, we're going to notice that humans are pretty unique in the whole universe. But why is it? Scientists have not been able to find the ideal conditions in any other planet rather than Earth for life to actually exist. And so far, scientists have been studying planets and, of course, different constellations around our universe in order to try to find life in another planet. But it hasn't happened so far. And I can tell you a little bit about the latest news regarding life, or let's say just evidence of possible life in other planets. And I remember that a couple of weeks ago, there was this news about there was this component that was phosphine that was found in Venus. And actually, this component is typical of those bodies, or those organic bodies that are decomposing. So that's why scientists are now theorizing that probably there might be life in Venus. But of course, there hasn't been like clear evidence of finding a bacteria, animal, or plant in that planet. But in another news that I can tell you about is about the one in Mars. And a couple of months ago, I remember that the first body of water in Mars was found. And it was salty water specifically. And one more time, scientists are theorizing that probably due to this salinity in the water, there might be some life forms. And probably the most important thing is not actually to find an animal, it's not to find a plant in there. But if we are actually able to find even bacteria in one of these planets, then that is going to give humanity a lot of more clues or a lot of more understanding on the way life can actually subsist, appear around the universe. So, if we find bacteria, just like I was telling you, it's possible that in other planets that are farther away from our solar system, there have been actually other organisms that are developing already or that are well developed, just like the ones we have in our planet. But so far, we haven't found evidence of life in any other planet rather than Earth. Life needs an ideal temperature and atmosphere conditions in order to survive at an environment. So, it means that the planet must be located at the perfect distance from the sun and not to have extreme temperatures. So that is why our planet is so unique in our universe, let's say. Because first, it is perfectly located at a distance from the sun to our planet so that the temperatures are not way too cold or way too hot for life to exist. And besides that, of course, we base our knowledge of life on what we know from Earth. And of course, we need an ideal atmosphere that includes oxygen, that has a lot of carbon as well. And in this specific atmosphere, due to the ideal conditions that it has provided life to the ideal conditions to start appearing. And that is why our planet is so unique from the universe. And that is why we also have to protect it and take care of it, because there is no other planet equal than ours so far. Now we're going to continue talking about Earth's early atmosphere. And Earth's early atmosphere was similar to the gases released by volcanoes during an eruption. There was a lot of carbon dioxide, water vapor, and nitrogen. Something very important that you need to notice is that there wasn't a lot of oxygen. And this is important to remember so we can keep track of some important things later on. And it favored chemical reactions which caused the formation of small organic molecules from inorganic molecules. All of them are carbon-based particles. Remember that this is something that I was telling you about in previous lessons, that it is still a little bit difficult to know the way organic particles were generated from inorganic particles. But actually, scientists have more theories about the way it happens. Oxygen interferes with these chemical reactions. That is why we do not observe them nowadays. And this is what I was telling you about. Oxygen is going to interfere with this new, or most likely with these reactions, let's say. So since there is a lot of oxygen in the environment from nowadays, it's actually impossible to get to see them in the natural world. And in 1953, Stanley Miller recreated Earth's early atmosphere by using water, hydrogen, methane, and ammonia. And he discovered several amino acids were generated. Amino acids are basically, let's think about them as smaller particles. They are small particles that are going to connect to each other and that form proteins. Then proteins are going to form many more things, such as genetical information for cells to be generated. And some scientists have argued that this experiment was not accurate, so they conducted other experiments with gases that are more similar to those exposed by volcanoes and low amounts of oxygen. They noticed fewer organic particles were produced. And scientists theorize that ultraviolet radiation and lightning contributed to the formation of these molecules. Of course, we have to remember that the atmosphere that we have nowadays is way different than the one that we used to have before. And since the atmosphere wasn't actually well formed, then there was a lot of ultraviolet radiation that came to our planet from the sun. But actually, this ultraviolet radiation could easily enter the atmosphere. And of course, after interacting with all of the molecules that there were, then scientists theorized that organic particles were created. And another thing to take into account, and here is the scientific doubt that is still there, is that scientists have not been able to recreate or fully recreate, I will say, this at a laboratory. Of course, they have been able to produce some amino acids, they have been able to produce proteins, but in fact, actually recreating a fully composed organic molecule is way more difficult than it seems. So that's why there are only theories, but there is still this doubt on how it happened. And here's the development of the biosphere. There are some organic components that necessarily had to come from a meteorite. These organic particles have been found in modern meteorites that impact Earth. When the components are mixed with water, they form vesicles. They are known as the predecessors to modern-day cells. So, what I can tell you about this is that there were some organic molecules that were formed before, right? But the thing is that these specific particles couldn't reproduce or couldn't group up together at some point. So that's why we need some extra components from meteorites, let's say. So meteorites brought some particles that have been found nowadays as well. And in these meteorites, you're going to find some sort of bags, let's say. So in these bags, then a lot of organic components are going to come inside the bag. And then they are going to start to multiply and generate more complex particles as the ones we know nowadays. And the small particles can combine into larger molecules. It's what I was telling you about. Amino acids can group up and then form proteins, and proteins can actually form larger particles. This principle has been observed in RNA particles and the way amino acids pile up to become a protein. These chemical bonds take place when the components are exposed to high temperatures. So scientists speculate that such particles could be found in water and then could get in contact with several materials at high temperatures when they got close to the land. And scientists have not been able to produce these results at a laboratory, so they can only theorize about it. And RNA particles have the capacity to constantly replicate. So, of course, what we need to generate at first is like an organism or, like a microorganism that can actually reproduce. So what we got at first can be multiplied and replicated in many occasions, so life can be generated. So scientists are saying that since there was a lot of volcanic activity, the land was pretty hot. And when this kind of particles will get in contact with these extremely hot temperatures, then chemical bondings will actually happen. And of course, RNA particles will be generated, and combining all of the material with meteorites that we were saying before, the first organic particles were actually generated, and they were able to multiply themselves. Here is a small image of what the atmosphere will look like, of course, during millions of years. And first of all, we have the multiply theories, which are in early Earth, 4 billion years ago. And you can notice that the conditions were quite different. There was low oxygen, UV radiation, heat, lighting. There were inorganic molecules as well as amino acids, and the first organic components actually were generated. And right over here, we have another perspective. Let's say that organic molecules came from meteorites, and the first organic components were generated. And in either way, these things happen. Small organic compounds form larger organic compounds, and RNA world hypothesis. Or if we go another way, organic compounds produce oxygen, oxygen produces ozone layers, and they reduce the ultraviolet radiation. And of course, new organic compounds are not generated or created. And basically, this is a quite synthesized timeline of the way the atmosphere has changed throughout time. And lastly, we have the coevolution of Earth systems. So we have the first heterotrophs, and the first prokaryotic cells appeared around 3.5 billion years ago on Earth. They evolved alone for 2 million years. They were responsible for the break of soil and the precursors of plant life. They are defined as heterotrophs since they need to consume food to provide themselves with energy. So basically this kind of organisms are similar to animals, let's say, but very simplistic animals. And they actually need to consume other components, other inorganic or other organic components in order to have energy. And then we continue with the first autotrophs. Anaerobic respiration produced this, carbon dioxide. Then organisms evolved to use these components as a source of energy. These species can turn inorganic components into organic nourishment by using light and water, which by definition we can say that they are sort of plants. So these organisms started to consume carbon dioxide, light, water, and other inorganic components in order to produce their own energy. And we have photoautotrophs, of course, in this category, which are the ones that use light in order to produce energy. Right over here, we have the formula for the photosynthesis, which basically means that we use carbon dioxide, light, and some water in order to produce sugar and oxygen. And then we have chemioautotrophs, and they use sources as deep sea vents to convert inorganic materials to organic nourishment. And basically, the formulas are a little bit similar. You take some components, and they are translated into energy. So that's about it for today, guys. Thank you a lot for coming. Remember to go back to the activities section so you can know what you have to do today. And I will see you around in a couple of minutes. Goodbye, and always take care.